An old gun dies in one of three ways, and none of them looks like death. The first is complexity. A design built from dozens of small, delicately fitted parts will eventually put one of them out of time. And when the factory that made those parts has been closed since before the Second World War, the gun does not break so much as stop. The second is ammunition. A rifle chambered for a cartridge that has been out of production for the better part of a century is mechanically perfect and permanently silent. A gun with nothing to fire has stopped as completely as a gun with a shattered action. The third is material. Wrought iron standing in for steel, barrels forge welded from ribbons of iron, stocks cut so thin at the wrist that a century of recoil splits them, materials that were adequate for 30 years and are treacherous at 100. All three deaths are on display on a gunsmith's bench in a small shop in November. 4 rifles lined up waiting for parts that have not been manufactured since before the Second World War. And beside them, one old single-barrel shotgun that needs nothing at all, because there is nothing in it to break. The 4 rifles were all better guns than the shotgun on the day they were made. Every one of them cost more. None of that matters now. What follows ranks 25 American hunting guns by the only measure the bench respects, not price, not production numbers, but the share of guns built before 1926 that are still mechanically sound, still safe with ammunition a person can actually buy, and still being carried. A gun in a museum case has not survived. Numbers 15 and 14 are the 2 rifles the United States Army issued and then discarded. Hundreds of thousands of both survive, and almost none are still hunted with. Number 1 is the cheapest gun on the list, never more than a few dollars new, with more working examples in American closets today than every rifle above it put together. The guns that climbed this list avoided all 3 deaths, which almost never had anything to do with how good they were when new. The gun at the bottom avoided none of them, and it goes first. Number 25, the Colt Lightning slide-action rifle. Colt built it to take a piece of Winchester's market from 1884 to 1904 in 3 frame sizes, roughly 90,000 of the medium frame alone. A pump-action rifle at a time when nobody else in America was making one. That originality is the whole story of its failure. The action depends on a large number of small parts, each one fitted to its neighbors, and even when the rifles were new, they were known for going out of time, for breaking extractors, for breaking carriers. A design like that survives only as long as somebody makes the pieces, and Colt has not manufactured a spare part for the Lightning in more than a century. There is no aftermarket. There is no drawer of replacements in any shop in the country, and the gunsmiths willing to open one up can be counted on a short list. So a Lightning that goes down today stays down. Most of the survivors hang on walls, complete and polished and inert, and the ones that still cycle are uncommon enough to be remarked on when they surface. Of the 25 guns on this list, this is the smallest working population. That was the price of being clever in 1884. One rung up, the killer changes. Number 24, the Winchester model, 1876. This was the big frame Winchester, built for the heavy cartridges of the northern plains. 63,871 of them between 1876 and 1897, the rifle of the Northwest Mounted Police and of Theodore Roosevelt's Dakota years. The mechanism did not condemn it, though the toggle link action was the weakest of the Winchester lever designs, and even the sound examples are shot gently when they are shot at all. What condemned it was the ammunition. The .45-75 is gone. The .50-95 is gone. The .45-60 and the .40-60 Winchester are gone, all of them out of regular commercial production for the better part of a century, and a rifle chambered for nothing a store sells has stopped just as surely as one with a broken action. Thousands of 1876 rifles survive as objects, oiled and intact, and worth real money. To fire one, a person must find brass, form it or have it formed, and load it by hand to the modest pressures the action will bear. The number fired in a given year is accordingly small enough that the hand loaders who do it mostly know one another. That circle of acquaintance is the entire working census. Number 23, the Sharps Model 1874. The falling block single shot of the buffalo range is scarce in a way nothing else on this list is scarce, because it was never common to begin with. The original Sharps company made only about 12 to 13,000 before it closed in 1881, a genuinely small number for a gun this famous. Fame did the rest. Nearly every Sharps an American has ever handled is a modern reproduction, and the ratio is not close. Replicas outnumber originals by an enormous margin so thoroughly that the copy has, in practice, replaced the gun. The originals that remain are sound more often than not. A falling block is a hard thing to wear out. But they are valuable enough that firing one is a financial decision, and the black powder cartridge shooters who keep the discipline alive compete almost entirely with the reproductions. What took the Sharps out of the field is worth being precise about because it was neither complexity nor entirely ammunition. It was value, which removes a gun from the field as completely as a cracked frame. A rifle too expensive to carry has left the woods, whatever its condition. The survivors that still get fired are few by count and fewer by practice. An original Sharps at a range is an event remarked on, photographed, and put away. Number 22, the Ballard single shot. Here the Sharps problem runs in reverse. The dropping block rifle made from 1861 and finished by Marlin through the 1890s, roughly 40,000 of all types, was one of the finest shooting American rifles of the 19th century, and much of that fineness is still in the metal. The frames are sound. The barrels are frequently excellent. That is exactly what makes the Ballard frustrating, because it was chambered in dozens of cartridges, many of them proprietary, and nearly all of them extinct, and the survivors are scattered across chambering so obscure that identifying one means measuring the chamber and reconstructing the cartridge from the numbers. Not a rare cartridge, a vanished one, a case no factory has formed in 100 years, and no ledger fully records. A rifle that will still shoot beautifully and has nothing to shoot is not a working gun. It is a cabinet gun with good manners. A dedicated minority refuses to accept this, forming brass with custom dies and loading rounds that have not been sold since the 1890s. Everyone else keeps the Ballard where it is. The number still firing is the size of that minority and no larger. The cabinets hold the rest. Number 21, the Remington rolling block. This is the cruelest entry at this end of the list because nothing below the top of it is stronger. The rolling block is one of the strongest breech designs ever made, produced by the million from 1867 onward and sold to armies on 4 continents, a mechanism that simply does not fail at the work it was designed to do. What limits it is not strength but pressure. The great majority were built for black powder, in the soft steel of their era, and the sporting rifles that drifted into American hunting camps are not rifles. A careful person feeds modern smokeless ammunition. The breech would likely hold, and the metal around it should never be asked to prove it. A century of hard use complicated the count further. Many were rebarreled, cut down, and converted, so what survives is an enormous population and a heavily altered one. The ones still shot belong to a modest, self-selected group, black powder shooters and single-shot enthusiasts who know exactly what they have and load for it accordingly, and almost nobody else. No flaw killed the rolling block. The material it was built in did. along with everything ammunition became after it. The strongest action in the bottom 5. That is what the bottom 5 means. Number 20. The Ithaca Flues Double. Ithaca built it on Emil Flues' patent from 1908 to 1926. Roughly 220,000 guns, one of the most popular American doubles of its day, and the first shotgun on this list to die the third death. The material that ages badly. The frame runs thin through the head of the stock, and that is where it cracks. Not the barrels, not the locks, not anything a shooter would think to watch. The frame itself, at the point where wood and steel bear against each other with every shot. The failure is common enough that the shooting community treats a Flues as suspect until proven otherwise. And a competent gunsmith, handed one today, does not begin by admiring the engraving. He begins by looking for the crack. Many have been condemned outright. The survivors carry a second sentence besides. The frames were built for the pressures and the shell lengths of their own era, and most of them should not be fired with anything currently sold at a hardware store. Of the 220,000 built, the share still safe to shoot bears no relation to that number, and none at all to how popular the gun was when it was new. Number 19. The Parker Brothers Shotgun. The Parker is the most celebrated American double ever built. About 242,000 guns between 1868 and 1942, the standard against which every other American shotgun was measured, and its problem sits lower than the Flues's. Not in the frame, in the barrels. The early Parkers carried Damascus tubes, ribbons of steel and iron forge welded around a mandrel, hundreds of seams spiraling down each barrel. The figure in the metal is not decoration. It is a map of the welds, and after a century those welds are exactly as reliable as their worst inch. The shooting world handles Damascus accordingly. The fluid steel Parkers made from the 1920s on are a different matter, and many of them are shot regularly. But they are a minority of the total. What the Parker had on its side was its price. The guns that survive best are the ones that were expensive enough to be babied, and Parkers were babied for 100 years. The working population is real but concentrated. Late guns, high grades, fluid steel. The famous name covers nearly 250,000 shotguns, and the ones still earning it are a narrow slice off the end of the production. Number 18, the L.C. Smith, the only mass-produced American sidelock double, built at Fulton, New York, from 1890. A sidelock mounts its locks on plates set into the wood behind the frame, and inletting those plates removes so much material from the head of the stock that too little remains to carry the recoil, so the stock cracks. It cracks at the head, it cracks along the lock inletting, it cracks so predictably that, given enough decades, nearly all of them do. The mechanism is sound. The barrels on the later guns are good steel. The L.C. Smith is not defeated by its action, it is defeated by its woodwork, and in a countdown governed by material that turns out to be the survivable verdict. Wood can be replaced. A competent stock maker can restock one or reinforce one, the repair is understood, and the guns are worth the labor. A fair number of the L.C. Smiths carried in the field today have had exactly that done. Working survival is middling and rising slowly, which nothing else in this stretch of the list can say. Of the 3 great American doubles ranked here, the Smith is the only one whose known failure has a known cure. The next 2 rifles have no failure to cure at all. That is not the same thing as ranking higher. Number 17. The Winchester Model 1886. This was John Browning's first great lever action, 159,994 built, and mechanically the strongest lever gun of its century, locked by vertical lugs that made everything before it look like a toy. Set it against the 3 killers. Complexity. The action is simple enough and strong enough that the survivors are still tight. The cartridge. The 4570 is not merely available, it is healthier now than it was in 1950. The material. The barrels are frequently excellent, and nothing in the gun ages badly. By every measure this list has used so far, the model 1886 should be sitting in the top 5. It is not, and the reason is money. An original 1886 in good condition is a 5-figure rifle, and a 5-figure rifle goes into a safe, not into a thorn thicket in the rain. Not broken, not obsolete, not starved of ammunition, retired by owners doing careful arithmetic. The verdict on this rifle is a matter of location. Mechanically, its survival runs close to total. In the field, it is scarce, and it is scarce by choice. That pattern, guns preserved out of the woods by their own value, governs every entry from here to number 10. Number 16, the Winchester Model 1885 High Wall. Before the 1886, there was this, Browning's first design, the rifle he sold to Winchester in 1883, about 140,000, made through 1920. A falling block single shot of exceptional strength and accuracy. Like the 1886, it does not break. The frames outlast their barrels. The part that wears out first is the part the bullet touches, and the steel behind it simply continues. Rebarreled high walls are still used in serious black powder cartridge competition, where they win against everything else. Not place, win. The obstacles are the familiar pair, chambering, and value. The originals came in an enormous spread of dead cartridges, and the collectible examples are priced out of the field as surely as the 1886 is. A meaningful number are still shot then, but almost always by specialists, and almost always through a barrel or a chamber the factory never supplied, which raises a fair question about what still working means. The answer the high wall gives is narrow and exact: the action. The frame was the rifle, the frame survived, and what Browning sold Winchester in 1883 has outlasted every barrel ever screwed into it. Number 15, the Trapdoor Springfield. The Army's hinged breech single shot in .45-70, roughly 700,000 built between 1873 and 1893, then sold off as surplus in the early 1900s at prices low enough that the rifle reached almost every rural county in America. The action is simple. The action is nearly unbreakable. The action is everywhere. That combination should place this entry far higher than 15th, and it would except for one hard fact about metal. The receivers are wrought iron or early low-grade steel, and the .45-70 cartridge did not stay where the Army left it. Modern factory ammunition in that caliber is loaded for the Marlins and the Rugers, rifles built a century later from better steel, and a box of it will wreck a trapdoor. What a trapdoor requires is a specialty low-pressure load or a hand load, not a preference, a condition of the rifle's continued existence. That requirement is the wall. The surviving population is huge, the mechanically sound population is large, and the population that goes to the woods is small, because most owners look at the ammunition problem once and lean the rifle back in the corner. 700,000 rifles, and the ones still hunting could fit in a single county. Number 14, the Krag Jorgensen. The United States Army's first smokeless repeater, about 500,000 made at Springfield between 1894 and 1904, with a side-loading magazine gate and the smoothest bolt ever fitted to an American service rifle. Like the trapdoor, it went to surplus. Unlike the trapdoor, it did not stay whole. Through the 1930s and 40s, the Krag was sporterized in home workshops by the hundreds of thousands. Barrels cut, stocks shortened, military furniture discarded, so that most surviving Krags are not intact service rifles, but plain hunting rifles that happen to have Springfield's work inside them. That butchery, as collectors would call it, is precisely what kept the rifle alive. The .30-40 Krag cartridge is still loaded commercially, intermittently but reliably enough, and the single locking lug keeps pressures modest, so a sound Krag is a usable Krag with ammunition from a catalog. The result is a rifle that survives in numbers and works in obscurity. Krags kill deer every autumn in Appalachia and the upper Midwest, carried by people who inherited them from a grandfather who cut the stock down himself. Nobody in those families has ever once thought of the thing as an antique. It is the deer rifle. Number 13, the Winchester Model 1873, and with it the list turns from an inventory of obstacles, dead cartridges, aging metal, prices too high to risk in the rain, to a study of why some guns never stopped. This is the rifle that got called the gun that won the West. 720,610 built from 1873 to 1919, chambered in .4440, .3840, and .3220. Its cartridges should have died the way the Model 1876's did. They did not, and the reason is a sport. Cowboy action shooting resurrected all three, and factory ammunition for a 150-year-old rifle sits on store shelves right now, boxed and priced and waiting. What limits the 1873 is the toggle link action, which is weak by modern standards and, more to the point, wears. The links stretch. The carrier goes out of time. A century of use leaves a great many 1873s loose in ways an owner can feel when the lever closes. But loose is not dead, and the competition circuit has rebuilt enough of them. New links, retimed carriers, the work of gunsmiths who see a dozen a year, that tight ones are not rare. This is the first entry on the list that can give the rankings question a plain yes. These rifles still work not as museum pieces exercised once a decade, but as rifles fired by the caseload on a Saturday at steel targets in matches named for a West most of the rifles are older than. Number 12, the Winchester Model 1890. The pump-action .22 designed by Browning, about 849,000 built from 1890 to 1941, the gallery gun of every shooting gallery and back porch in America. Here the list arrives at its quietest and most decisive principle. A .22 rimfire is the gentlest thing a mechanism can be asked to do. No recoil worth the name, no pressure that stresses steel, no force that peens or batters. A Model 1890 action that has digested a century of shooting shows almost no wear, because there was never anything for the wear to come from. That is the whole reason it sits this high. Not craftsmanship, though the craftsmanship was real, but the sheer smallness of the job. The weaknesses are two, and both are modest. The takedown joint loosens, the way takedown joints do, and the earliest examples were chambered for .22 short, .22 long, or .22 extra long only, not for the .22 long rifle that is now the only rimfire anyone stocks, which strands the first production years in the same ammunition purgatory as the Ballard, on a smaller scale. The rest still run. A large share of surviving Model 1890s function today, still being shot behind barns and off porches by families who never considered them collectible and would be puzzled by the suggestion. Number 11, the Stevens favorite. The little tip-up single-shot .22 sold through the Sears catalog for a few dollars from 1894, roughly $1 million, made across all variations before production ended in 1935. It has almost nothing in it. A lever, a breech block, a hammer, a spring. And that is the complete inventory, because there is no part in a favorite complicated enough to be worth failing. The ones that do break are fixed with anything a machinist can turn in an afternoon, which is a kind of immortality no patent ever conferred. Its cartridge is the .22 rimfire, the most available ammunition on Earth. Its recoil is nil, so a century of use produces almost no wear. It was cheap enough that nobody ever protected one, which meant every one of them got used. And getting used is how a gun stays alive. The only thing holding the favorite out of the top 10 is the tip-up barrel joint, which loosens with the decades. A failure of accuracy long before it is a failure of safety. The difference between a rifle that shoots where it looks and one that shoots near it. Most owners never notice. The squirrels presumably do. 1 million rifles at a few dollars each, and after 90 years, the mechanism has not yet found a reason to stop. Number 10. The Winchester Model 1895. This was the lever-action Winchester built for the smokeless age. A box magazine instead of a tube. 425,881 made. Strong enough for high-pressure cartridges that would have destroyed every lever gun that came before it. Nothing about the mechanism has failed the century. The actions are robust, the rifles survive mechanically well, and Russia bought nearly 300,000 of them in the 7.62 Russian cartridge, a contemporary of the .30-06, and those rifles still turn up sound. Mechanical soundness, though, was only ever half of it. The American sporting versions came largely in .405 Winchester, .35 Winchester, and .30-40 Krag, and the .405 has been a specialty item for 100 years. The population splits cleanly in two. Where the chambering is a living one, the survival is solid. Those rifles feed, fire, and go out in the fall. Where the chambering is dead, the survival is effectively zero, and the rifle beside it, built the same year on the same machinery to the same standard, has stopped. The same steel, the same action, two different fates decided entirely by what the barrel was cut for. Number 9, the Savage Model 99. And here, for the first time on this list, the population is simply healthy. The 99 was the hammerless lever action with a rotary magazine carried inside the receiver. In continuous production from 1899 to 1998, more than 1 million built, and the only lever gun of its era that could safely fire pointed bullets. The design solved the survival problem before anyone knew it was a problem. The action is enclosed. Weather stays out, dirt stays out, a November rain runs off the receiver instead of into it. And the mechanism was strong enough that later 99s were chambered for cartridges. The old exposed hammer guns could not approach. Its cartridges never died. 300 Savage and 250 3000 are still commercially loaded, and the 30-30 and 308 versions exist in numbers, so ammunition has never once been the obstacle. The consequence is visible every deer season in New England and the upper Midwest, where the Model 99 remains a common rifle in the hands of people who have no interest in its history and no idea it has one. Nobody who carries one is curating anything. The rifle works, it has always worked, and it was sealed against the one enemy no gunsmith can repair. The weather never got in. Number 8, the Marlin Model 1893, and its descendant, the 336. Marlin's answer to the Model 1894 Winchester, roughly 900,000 of the 1893 built from 1893. And the reason it stands this high is a fact about time rather than steel. The design never stopped being made. The 1893 became the Model 36. The Model 36 became the 336, and the same basic action was still leaving the factory in the 21st century. That continuity changes everything about what happens when one of these rifles breaks. Parts commonality is unusually good for a gun of this age, and a gunsmith who takes in an 1893 is not decoding a dead mechanism from patent drawings. He is working on an action he has had apart 100 times because he has had 100 336 apart. The design helped its own case. The solid top receiver and side ejection made it easy to keep clean and easy to scope, and the locking block is a large, simple piece of steel that wears the way large, simple pieces of steel wear, which is slowly. A substantial fraction of surviving 1893s are still fed modern .30-30 factory ammunition without anyone thinking twice, and that phrase is the verdict. Without anyone thinking twice. The Colt Lightning stops a conversation at a gun counter. The The Marlin does not start one. Number 7. The Winchester Model 1897, Browning's exposed hammer pump shotgun, 1,024,700, built between 1897 and 1957. The first pump gun that genuinely worked, and the gun that put the double out of business. It survives for the plainest structural reason on this list. It was overbuilt. The action is heavy, simple, and forgiving, made in an era when the standard was to overbuild everything, and the arithmetic of a century of use reads accordingly. Worn 1897s are common. Broken ones are not. The cautions that attach to it are real, and they are the cautions of its era rather than of its design. Most were built for the shorter shot shells of their day, and for lower pressures, and the fixed full chokes on many of them will not tolerate modern steel shot. These are known quantities, understood by the people who own the guns, and they have not kept the guns home. Thousands of Model 1897s are still carried on opening day every autumn, through fence rows and flooded timber, hammerback, in the rain, which is precisely the test this list is applying. A shotgun that has been doing the same job since before the Wright brothers flew, and is still scheduled for this October. Number 6. The Springfield 1903. The Army's bolt action from 1903 through the Second World War, roughly 1 1/3 million of the original rifles, plus the wartime 1903 A3, built to a military specification that assumed abuse, assumed mud, assumed a 19-year-old cleaning it wrong. A rifle designed for that life does not find deer season difficult. The receivers are strong, with one well-documented exception. The low-numbered receivers made under the early single heat treat process, a flaw the Army itself identified, and one every knowledgeable owner checks for by serial number before firing. That caution stated, the rest of the story is abundance. The 1903 fires the .30-06, the single most available centerfire hunting cartridge in North America, and it has held that position for 100 years, an advantage no dead chambering on this list ever had. And then there is what happened after the wars, when the rifles came home. Hundreds of thousands were cut down and restocked in basement workshops, rooted directly into hunting use instead of into cabinets. An ordinary sporterized 1903 is still a completely serviceable deer and elk rifle, and thousands of them are used as exactly that, from the Alleghenies to the Rockies, every fall, by families who got them from the government for almost nothing and have carried them ever since. Number 5. The Winchester Model 1892. John Browning designed it in 2 weeks on a bet by taking the vertical locking lugs of his Model 1886 and scaling them down to a frame the size of the old 1873. Winchester built 1,004,675 of them between 1892 and 1941, and the arithmetic of the design has not changed since. An action engineered for rifle pressures, fed cartridges that produce pistol pressures. The margin is enormous, and the margin is the whole story. The toggle-link rifles it replaced stretch and loosen and go out of time with use. The 1892 does not, because nothing inside it works anywhere near its limit, and a 100-year-old 1892 is routinely tighter than a 50-year-old rifle of lesser design. Its chamberings, .44-40, .38-40, .32-20, .25-20, should have died the way the 1876's cartridges died, and did not, kept in production first by nostalgia and then by competition shooting, which consumes them by the case. That is the unusual condition of this rifle a century on. It is one of the few guns on this list that is both a collectible and a rifle. People genuinely shoot every week, and the ones on the firing line at a Saturday match are not replicas. Number 4, the Marlin Model 39. One rung up sits a .22, and it earns the position on a fact no other gun in the world can claim. The lineage runs unbroken from the Marlin Model 1891 through the Model 1897 the 39, and the 39A, the longest continuously produced shoulder firearm in the world. That sentence sounds like trivia. It is the decisive fact of this entry, because continuous production defeats all three of the ways an old gun dies at once. Parts were available for the entire life of the design. Gunsmiths never lost familiarity with the mechanism, because the mechanism never left their benches. A rifle built in 1920 can be repaired with knowledge, and often with components, from one built in 1980. Add the rest of the ledger. It is a rimfire, so a century of shooting produces almost no wear, and it is a takedown, so it rode in cars and boats and saddle scabbards instead of standing in a cabinet. The consequence is visible at any gun show in the country. It is difficult to find a model 1897 or an early 39 that does not still function, and most of them are not in collections. They are in families, handed down along with the squirrel woods they were bought for. Number 3, the Winchester Model 12. Winchester built it from 1912 to 1963, 1,968,307 of them, and built every one the same way. Machined from solid steel with no stampings anywhere in it. Not a stamped shell carrier, not a stamped trigger guard, nothing folded or pressed or spot welded, bar stock, cut away until a shotgun remained. That standard no longer exists commercially because no company could sell the labor at a price anyone would pay, and the standard is the reason the gun sits at number 3. For half a century, it was known as the perfect repeater, and the name was marketing that happened to be true. Model 12S that have digested 100,000 rounds are still tight, and when one does come to a bench, the common repairs are adjustments rather than replacements. The cautions of its era apply. Chamber length, fixed chokes, and they are so widely understood that a great many Model 12S have been opened up or fitted with modern barrels, precisely so they could keep working. More than a century after the first ones shipped, the Model 12 is still a serious competition in field gun, bought to be used, and not a nostalgia purchase. Number 2, the Winchester Model 1894. More than 7 million have been built since 1894, which makes it the most successful sporting rifle in American history, and volume alone would place it near the top of any ranking. Volume is not why it is here. The action is simple, the pressures are moderate, and the parts were manufactured for 8 decades, so a competent gunsmith in any small town has worked on dozens of them. But the decisive fact is the cartridge. The .30-30 Winchester has never once been out of production, and it is stocked in every hardware store and gas station in deer country, a form of life support no other century-old rifle enjoys. An 1892 owner orders his ammunition. A trapdoor owner loads his own. A Model 1894 owner buys a box at the counter where he buys his gasoline. And that difference, repeated every autumn for 100 years, is what kept these rifles in the field instead of on the wall. The gun that gets used is the gun that gets kept up. And the numbers that result are without parallel here. Hundreds of thousands of Model 1894s, built before 1926, are still hunted with. Not preserved, not merely sound, hunted with. A claim no other centerfire rifle on this list can make. 7 million built was a head start. The hardware store did the rest. Number 1, the single-barrel break-action shotgun. The Harrington and Richardson, the Ivor Johnson Champion, the Stevens, the Crescent, and the dozens of hardware store brands made for Sears, Montgomery Ward, and every regional chain that wanted its own name on a barrel. A hammer, a barrel, a hinge, and a spring. It wins on the logic that has governed this list since entry 25. There is nothing in it to break. No magazine, no bolt, no linkage, no timing to lose. A worn one is still a working one, and the failures it does suffer, a weak mainspring, a loose hinge pin, are corrected at a bench with parts a machinist makes in an hour. Nobody collected them. Nobody babied them. Nobody put one in a safe. And the neglect turned out to be the final advantage. The surviving population was never curated. It is the working remainder, guns used hard for a century, that simply refuse to quit. Every other entry on this list ends with a measure of how many still work. This one cannot, and the reason it cannot is part of the victory. So many were sold under store brands that no single ledger covers them. There is no factory total, no registry, no count. What can be said is this: the number of pre-1926 single barrels still capable of firing is beyond every rifle above them, the cheapest gun in American history, and the one most likely to still work. The gunsmith's bench from the beginning of this list is still set the way it was. The 4 rifles lie where they were left, tagged and waiting, and what they are waiting for: a carrier, an extractor, a small fitted part last manufactured before the Second World War, may surface at an estate sale someday, or may not. The single-barrel shotgun is gone. It went home the day it came in, because there was nothing to do to it. What separates those 4 rifles from that one shotgun is not quality. Every one of them was the better gun when new. It is not price. Every one of them cost more. It is not accuracy or workmanship or the reputation of the maker, because all of that was settled a century ago and none of it turned out to matter. The ranking exposed 3 rules, and only 3. A gun outlives its owner if it is simple enough to repair. A gun outlives its owner if it is chambered for something someone still loads. A gun outlives its owner if it was cheap enough that nobody was ever afraid to carry it. The 3rd rule beat the first 2, which is why the list ends where it does. The expensive guns are in safes now, with the humidity controlled and the ammunition unavailable, appreciating quietly in a dark that smells faintly of oil. And the $2 shotgun is standing behind a kitchen door somewhere with 1 shell in it, waiting for something to get into the chicken house, exactly as it was doing in 1922. The safe is locked. The door is not.